Yo guys, what's up? Ben here and welcome back to another episode. So today's going to be a little bit of a different episode. For those of you who didn't used to follow my Instagram, I used to do a feature that was what would you do? I'd basically pick a couple or one very interesting hands where there was a very contentious point in the hand, and then I would get feedback from other people about what you thought about the spot. Today's going to be very, very similar. For the first two hands, they're both going to be what would you do's. Then there will be two regular hands, and then at the end of the video, I will reveal the results of the first two hands. So please do, if you have any ideas, thoughts, or just speculation on the way that I played those hands, definitely do let me know in the comments below, and I will be sure to respond to those. But firstly, let's jump on into the graph so far for the month and see how we're getting on. So we can see in the graph that there is a bit of a mouth forming between the green and the orange line, but there's nothing we can really do about pre-flop all-ins. We played about 19,000 hands, which is pretty good volume, I'd say, for about halfway through the month. And we're winning about 3K in green line and winning about 21K in orange line. The 21K in orange line is like 5 or 6 big blinds per 100, so we're definitely above EV in some shape or form, I would guess. But overall, things are going well and I'm feeling pretty positive. Let's hop into the hands and see what we've got for you guys today. And in our first, what would you do on the channel? We have got 8, 7 of hearts in the big blind, and we get an open from a reg that I am friends with, that I know from the UK, top guy, and is just a very, very solid and definitely somebody who can get kind of in the mix as well. So they open for 2.5x. I am actually going to mix this hand, and I do decide to call on this occasion. We flop a very, very pleasing open-ended and flush draw, and we face a small bet on the flop. Going to be calling sometimes, but to be honest with you, I wouldn't mind just like bucketing this one into a pure raise, and I'm pretty sure that is what I did in game as well. So we go ahead and raise it up 50% pot. We see a 6 of spades on the turn, and this is actually a very, very interesting card for us now. I think we want to be doing a bunch of betting on this flop. When we do check raise the flop, generally speaking on these kind of ace high boards, we're going to be using quite a lot of bottom and second pair. Unlike other boards in later position where you're using a lot more bottom pair, I think versus MP and under the gun, you're using more second pair as your check raising hands. So this is definitely a card that's going to hit us pretty well. We're going to be wanting to barrel this turn fairly aggressively. And especially when we have 8, 7 of hearts, we are blocking some of the 6x from in position as well. The thing that we probably do need to consider here is that when the board does pair and we have raised a flop that kind of doesn't get raised that often anyway, we do probably want in position to have some hands that are going to want mixed fold with our cards. So even a hand like King 7 or King 8 of hearts, even though they may seem like a fist pump continue, when we're going to be using an overbet size on the turn and in positions flush draws are dead or low equity versus a lot of our very, very good hands, those hands become very, very unattractive to call. So I do think overbetting this combo is probably going to be okay, at least some of the time. I did decide to check sometimes, and on this occasion I did hit check, and I decide that when I do check and face a bet, I'm always going to be check raising my hand. Not only do we get like a number of folds in theory, but I think in reality, population is probably going to overstab an ace in position here, and then probably going to overfold it as well. So I do think our check raise on the turn becomes very, very profitable. Not only that, but like this is quite an unusual line to face. And generally speaking, when you face unusual lines, I think it's a little bit more value heavy than it is going to be bluff heavy. Obviously, our hand is kind of almost a value raise anyway. So I do go ahead and raise 70% pot, and in just a moment, we are going to pause it before we kind of share the results, and those results will be at the end of the hand. So we see the 7 of clubs on the river. This is the point of contention. Well, actually, there have been quite a few points of contention. What do you want to do on the river with 8, 7 of hearts in this node? And also, what did you want to do previously in the hand? Definitely let me know in the comments and stick around for the end of the video where I will be sharing the results. And in our second what would you do this week, we have got Queen Jack offsuit, and we open it up and we get a cold call out the small blind versus a brown tag, which for those of you who don't know, brown tag is my passive recreational. Now you can see that they are 17 VPIP. I don't know how many hands that is over, but we definitely do have the read because we wouldn't have the note otherwise. Now we see ace 10 9. We have got the double flush blockers and the open ender as well, and I decide to bet 70% pot. This is going to be a mix in theory, but I'm just going to bet my hand every single time against this player type. It is important to note that they have cold called the small blind, so definitely keep that in mind for later in the hand. We turn the double backdoor pretender flush draw with the Queen of clubs and the Jack of spades, and I decide to again pure barrel my combo, and I go overbet on the turn. We now face a bit of a tank before villain does call. We see a 6 of clubs on the river and villain checks to us for a 3rd time. Now, what do we want to do in this situation? Do you want to bet? Do you want to check? Do you want to shove? All options are on the table. Do let me know in the comments below. And remember the player type that we're playing alongside the fact that they have cold called the small blind, not the big blind. Next up, we are playing 2KNL on GG, and this is just a regular hand, not a what would you do, so sit back and relax. Now we get a limp from the small blind. So this is a purple tag, and if the person who is in this hand is watching this video, I didn't know who you were at the start, so we had you purple tag, which means some kind of reg. I've since upgraded this reg to orange tag. For those of you who don't know what orange tag is very aggressive reg who is extremely willing to put it in at any opportunity. I don't think this player would disagree with that. Either way, I have king, queen of clubs, and for all intents and purposes, this is an unknown player to me, and they go ahead and limp raise to 310. Now, I've got to be honest, my strategy against the limp is not as strong as a lot of my other nodes. But what I do know is that I am always going to be defending king, queen of clubs versus the limp raise. We do flop a little bit of something on the 10-10-6, well, a very, very small bit of something, I would say. And we do face the c-bet of, I think it was 40% pot. Nope, just over 1/3 pot. Don't think there's anything else to do but call here. We've obviously got backdoor clubs, we've got overs, and our position should just be limp raising, an abundance of kind of like lower cards as well as like very, very good hands. We do turn a little bit of help on the 2 of clubs. Now we have 2 overs and a flush draw, and villain fires out for about 40% pot. I wonder whether or not we should be shoving here. I don't have the sims for these limp raise spots, so I don't know what is the right approach here. Regardless, I do go with the more conventional call, and we go to a river. We do river top pair on the king of diamonds. Fantastic river for us, and also a river that should be pretty good for the out of position player. I think they're going to be limp raising a bunch of like king jack offsuit type combos, king 9, king 8, king 5, king 6. So I do think that they're going to be following through on this river a lot, but we did get a pretty fast check on the river. Not sure what to make of that entirely, but what I do know is that we just do arrive with this combo, and it just has to be a pure shove, and we are pretty happy about it, I would say. They do go into the tank, which is great news for us, pretty much guarantees that we have the best hand here always. And after not too long of a tank, villain does call with 9, 6 of spades. Honestly, I can't tell you whether or not this is good. Intuitively, it doesn't feel amazing. It does block pocket 6s, but we probably don't always ISO that pre-flop, and then the 9 doesn't block any 10s either. But what do I know? Either way, we do win this stack, and it's gone very well for us this time. And in our last hand today, but definitely do stick around because we are going to share the results and maybe some sims from those first 2 hands, we pick up pocket 10s at 1KNL, and we 3-bet a good reg from under the gun. Now, we get cold called on the button, and this player on the button was a bit of a weird one. They are from Brazil, which is usually pretty polarizing, usually a super reg or a super rec, but I just assumed that this player was a reg for the simple reason that they were real named. So when someone's real named, generally speaking, that they're more of a reg than a recreational in my experience anyway. But they do cold call the 3-bet, so it's all a little bit off and a little bit sus. I'm not 100% sure what's going on. We are pretty deep as well. We're about 160 big blinds deep with the button. We see Jack 6-3 rainbow. Now this is a board that probably should favor us, I would guess, simply because we just have the wealth of overpair region here. We have ace jack suited, admittedly don't have ace jack offsuit, but also I don't know what imposition is up to here. We go 3-way. I could definitely see this being a c-bet. If it was queen 6-3 rainbow, I probably would just range bet simply because we just have ace queen offsuit as well. Jack high board, a little bit unsure. The cold call kind of throws me off a little bit. So I do decide to check. It's probably standard. Don't know why I'm still talking about it. And imposition does check back. They very, very quickly check back as well. Important to know. We see a 7 of clubs on the turn. Under the gun checks. I don't think I really want to be betting now. Now imposition blocks the turn and under the gun calls. I don't know. I think I've got to call. I think out of position can very likely have flush draws, pocket 5s, maybe even like an 8-7 suited, maybe even like, well, a bunch of jacks, maybe even 9s. In position, again, could have some like 8-7s, some pocket 5s, some pocket 9s, probably a decent amount of jack X, but we are getting a pretty good price here. If we do river a 10, I don't think people have 9-8. I think our implied odds are okay. Am I making excuses? Maybe. I don't know. I'm just going to call and see how things go. It doesn't actually matter though, because we just bang off a second set on the 10 of diamonds And I think now we just have a pretty mandatory check on the river. Leading is just very, very sus. Now under the gun folds as well, and we have a decision. We see 1/4 pot on the river, which is sus to say the least. And I think we can pretty safely assume now, or should I say maybe at the showdown, that this player is not a reg. But I do think going for the absolute maximum here is the right play. Regardless, I go for it all, which is the 14x raise or 140 big blinds and pile it in. Villa now tanks for a little while before flicking it in with the old ace jack offsuit with the jack 10 blocker, the aces blocker, the pocket jacks blocker. Can't really blame them actually for the river call. However, pre-flop, flop and turn was okay, I guess. Flop probably should have bet. It's all not ideal, I would say, but definitely upgraded this player to recreational after this hand, and we somehow managed to win the 3.5k pot by getting extremely lucky on the river. So here we are back with the first hand, and these are the results and what I decided to do. So as a reminder, I defended the big blind, check raised the flop, check raised the turn, and now we have rivered second pair. So ultimately, I decided to give up the river, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why I gave up the river before deciding whether or not I like it or not. I gave up the river because I believe that in these hyper filtered spots versus population, you get way fewer folds than you can ever expect in a sim. And because we've check raised the flop, check raised the turn, which is already a very unconventional line, in position is just going to be super incentivized to continue very strong on the turn. Therefore, I'm not a huge fan of bluffing the spot. That said, however, I'm not happy that I gave up this river. Not only do we have no showdown, I think in position, as I said, bet folds like some king high flush draws. So maybe we win versus like the king 10, king jack, king queen of hearts on occasion, but they may bluff anyway. I'm going to talk a little bit about why they probably should be bluffing the river. The reason they should be bluffing the river is that when we check raise flop and check raise turn, we naturally have a super fast play node. Fast play node basically means that when you've taken the super aggressive route, you pretty much do check fold. Well, not your range, but you over check fold, i.e. you check fold way more than MDF. This is exactly one of those situations. I have no reason to slow down with any of my value combos. All of my 6x is still worth a shove, and 7x has a no showdown, but also because I'm in a fast play node, I just get to basically shove everything on the river. You're going to give up some hands, I don't know, maybe like a king deuce of hearts or something like that if you had check raise the turn with it. Actually, I don't know if you're meant to do that, but you get the idea. There's a very narrow range that are going to check fold. So because I'm in such a fast play node and my bluffs are so unintuitive, and in position probably does have a bit more ace-x than they should have, I think that kind of cancels out the fact that I've hyper filtered in positioned range. I could be wrong on that, and I might be making some wrong assumptions, and I also might be being results oriented to some extent. You guys can let me know, but fundamentally, I would have liked to have seen myself shove this river, and I didn't. So I did check, and then after a bit of a tank, in position also does check back with ace king with a heart. They did tank for a little bit. Maybe they were considering value shoving, expecting that I have literally exactly the type of hand I have. But let me know what you thought about this hand. It's a super interesting one. I'd be curious to hear. So here we are back at the what would you do hand 2. As a reminder, we've opened MP, small blind has cold called, not the big blind. We've B70 on the flop, we have overbet the turn for 133% pot, and then we have a decision point on the river. So ultimately, I went for the perhaps not so good, or perhaps good, depending on the way you see this, all in for about 1.5 or 2 times pot. So the reason I decided to do this was for 2 reasons. First and foremost is actually nothing to do with my blockers, it's to do with the player type. Brown tag, passive recreational, generally speaking, lets you know how good that hand is early on in the hand, and generally likes to fold a lot of spots. Not only that, but when a recreational of this kind of stature cold calls a small blind, they're going to have way more ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, ace 5, those kind of combos, maybe even like an ace 7 of hearts or something like that. They just generally speaking 3-bet very little and cold call quite a lot more, I would say, with hands that you would ordinarily 3-bet. Second, and obviously very importantly, is the cards that we hold. We hold the queen of clubs, which blocks a bunch of out of positions best flushes. King, queen, queen, jack, queen 10, probably even a queen 9, and that's about it. Now let's talk about the negatives of our hand. Jack of spades is an absolutely awful card to hold. You could almost make arguments for just never, ever, ever bluffing the jack of spades. So we block queen jack, king jack, ace jack, maybe even a jack eight of spades, which are going to be some of the first folds for our position. However, fundamentally, if we assume that a player is overfolding and also they're going to have more of the kind of the ace-x region, like as I said, like ace-7, ace-8 of hearts, ace-jack offsuit, etc., maybe even two pairs, we can probably assume that that may well tip the folding frequencies back in our favor in this exact situation. I guess you could make an argument here that we should just go 2/3 pot. However, I just don't think we get them to fold the portions of the range like two pair that we really, really, really want to leverage when we're betting this spot. I actually think betting 70% pot is the worst option out of all options here. Checking may be best, and all in will be either one of the best or second best option here, I would guess. But either way, I do decide to shove, and on this occasion, we get snap called by none other than the nuts, which is king jack of clubs. That is the last what would you do though. Definitely let me know what you think about this one. So that is it for today's video. Let me know what you thought about the what would you do format. If you like it, I will definitely do more of that in the future. Or if you would like me to review some of your hands in a what would you do format, definitely also let me know. And last thing, please do go ahead and drop me a sub if you haven't already. But until next time, take care and I'll see you at the tables.